In a world where everyone thinks Glocks and M&Ps are the only handguns in existence, I'm glad there's a new company trying to make a name for itself to add a little spice and variety to the good old boys club of the gun world. That company is Lionheart Industries. When I bought my Breitling Super Ocean, the store offered me bottles of water with bubbles in it. I got a genuine leather case lined with what could only pass as Alcantara suede. Want to know what I got when I bought my M&P Shield? A cardboard box that, quite frankly, a bum wouldn't live in. Sure, when you buy a Glock, you get a shiny, fancy, plastic box. But I just bought a $600 gun. I don't want it to come in a lunchbox. I want it to feel special, and not like I just bought a pair of socks. The LH9 came to me in a nylon case with the stylistic detailings of a surgeon's kit. Everything had its place, down to the frog lube it came with. The gun is kept in its own little deceptively obvious compartment. Unlike the Glock box, where putting a gun in the box is like trying to pack those last pair of shoes in an already overpacked suitcase. Now, when it comes to the way this gun looks, well, I'll put it like this. The LH9 looks like what you would get if a 1911 Glock and 6 Sauer got a little drunk, had a little pistol orgy, and the Pro-Life 6 Sauer had a baby. Shockingly, the LH9 is a damn good looking pistol. The proportions are almost Glock 19 perfect. Visually, there's a lot going on with this gun, but not in a bad way. The visual orgy of lines, cuts, and edges speak to the attention to detail. This gun is very entertaining to look at, and I found myself doing just that, looking at it. This gun has some serious character. Just like Beyonce obviously got her hips from Mama Tina, the LH9 got its ergonomics from a SIG, with some subtle differences. The grip has a pronounced palm swell with a deep indentation under the beaver tail. Unlike the Glock that sits super low in your hand, the LH9 sits high like the SIG, except the LH9 doesn't have the urge to flip in your hand like the SIG does. For a gun that sits so high in your hand, the beaver tail does a good job of keeping the gun down. I think the safety sits a little too high. So instead of simply sweeping it off, I feel like I have to play thumb war with the safety to find it and sweep it down. I do like how the safety completely disengages the trigger though. Personally, I don't like safeties on any of my guns, and this safety isn't doing much for changing my mind about that. Visually, the grip texture is very prominent. It's one of the first things you notice about the gun. Physically, it all but disappears in your hand. You don't really feel them. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. Now let's talk about this quadruple action trigger for a second. They call it something else, but I think quadruple action trigger is more fitting. This system allows you to pull the hammer back, then push it forward so that your first trigger pull is essentially a very definitive two-stage trigger. It's like a pre-pull for the trigger. Kind of like whipping out a prenuptial agreement during the wedding right before you say I do. You need just a little bit of assurance before you pull the trigger. Pun intended. Initially, I struggled with the LH9. I had a hard time getting a feel for the gun. But it's like hearing a Currency album for the first time. It just seems so uninspiring. But then you keep listening to it, and the next thing you know, you've downloaded all of his mixtapes. That's what the LH9 is like. It's a unique feeling gun, and kind of has its own lane, much like the CZs. The recoil on the LH9 is like watching a Floyd Mayweather fight. It does a skillful job of handling the recoil, but nothing about it makes you remember it the next day. That's good for the LH9, not so great for Floyd. When it comes to shooting this gun fast, there's a sweet spot with the trigger that really lets this gun fly. But it's not as easy as the Glock to get this gun running fast. But when you get it right, it's really rewarding. I ran a lot of rounds through this gun, and I had no reliability issues. I didn't clean or lube it prior to filming or during any of the off-camera shooting I did with it. The gun is accurate, and I think a lot of it had to do with the tight tolerances of the gun. But like I said before, shooting accurately isn't a walk in the park, nor is it a chore. You're just gonna have to get a feel for it first, and then once you develop a rapport with this gun, things really start clicking.